We are live. Welcome to A Celtic State of Mind. I'm Paul John Dykes and I'm joined by JP Mason, looking very festive. I normally ask you about your jersey over your shoulder. What's going on with this? Is that a onesie?
No, it's cut off at the bottom. It's a simple Christmas jumper, but I thought it would be too warm. My temperature's all over the place at the moment after a booster yesterday, so I didn't want to put that jumper on and melt. I'm already kind of melting as we speak here. So, but I just thought day before Christmas Eve, instead of a football top, I would display a Celtic FC Christmas jumper. By the way, this is not product placement. I have this was a gift to me last year. There's no skin in this game from Celtic for me.
Yes, the rumours that we are financed by the club are unfounded. And you're talking about temperature. I'm sitting here with a jacket on, not a leather one from Matalan, I've got to say, but it is a jacket nonetheless. We were talking last night about Christmas jerseys, actually, because obviously we wanted to talk about everything except for the performance. And I think Acsom will probably launch one next year at Christmas time. Got a few ideas for that. But it led us down the road talking about the fact that Enrico Annoni used to have to wear Celtic Superstore gloves rather than sponsored gloves back in the day. And he responded to that. I've seen he responded to one of your programme tweets as well, JP. There is a point to this, because one of your tweets last week was your first cup final as a Celtic supporter. 1994, League Cup final, or the Coca-Cola Cup final against Wraith Rovers. We all know what happened there. And you came out and said, you made a comment around, you can't take any cup final for granted. Just look at your first cup final. Let's start off with the positives, because you've not had a chance to talk about it yet, and then we'll move on to the St Mirren game and everything that entails. Talk to me about your weekend, the cup final weekend, JP.
Well, no, I obviously was immensely looking forward to getting back to Hampden. We hadn't been there in a cup final. No one had been there in a cup final since December 2019. So that in itself was exciting. Definitely a bit nervous going into it. There was no two ways about that. Obviously, when you see Kyogo Furuhashi's name in the starting lineup, you maybe sort of perk up a little bit because you know what he can do. And, well, he went and did it, didn't he? So that was... I'd say it's up there with one of my favourite cup final experiences. And because it's something that we've been denied for so long, it was kind of like... I mean, I'm not a big experimenter with drugs, but I've never taken hallucinogenic drugs. But I'm going to say that was kind of up there, and kind of like, it was like dream stuff, like when Furuhashi equalised so quickly after the Hibs opener, which, from where I was at the other end of the ground, I was sort of questioning whether it had gone over the line, because it didn't. I didn't see the net ripple. I couldn't see what happened. There was no replays, despite Hampden's new fancy screens. There was no replay of the goal. So I was just sort of left to go, okay, well, it was a goal then. Obviously, since seen it, and very much a goal. But to get the equaliser so quickly and with such quality, the touch and the finish is just sublime. And then losing Turnbull was a blow. Beaton came on, and I've been very critical of Near Beaton on this Bulletin over the last year or so, because it must be about a year now since I've been on. Started deep in the midst of lockdown, but I thought Beaton played well. Really contributed to the game, and earned his medal, which is something I don't think Near Beaton has really ever done. And again, I've talked about that as well. Where you've got these guys that have been on the periphery of things and never actually properly been like, well, I've contributed to that cup final. So yeah, and then the second goal was just a thing of absolute art. I think it's already been painted by some of the Celtic canvas artists. And you see the difference, the quick thinking of Rogic with the free kick. I mean, you touched on it in the post match, and since the fast thinking and the nonchalance as well. I wouldn't say it was arrogance, but nonchalance of being able to finish over your shoulder like that was just amazing. And you saw what it meant to him, and he obviously said he was chomping at the bit to contribute to the team. and play, even though he probably wasn't 100%. So yeah, just the atmosphere at the end, celebrating the songs, seeing Postecoglou with the trophy. We've come so far in such a short space of time. And I think Amy touched on it on Monday, just saying, didn't know if we would see us winning a trophy again for maybe a while, just with the extent of the rebuild. So to have it so soon, and obviously being cognizant of the fact that the restrictions were probably coming. And again, I think that made the occasion a bit more special, because you're just like, I'm going to enjoy every second of this, because I don't know when we'll be back. I mean, God, I really hope it's soon. But yeah, I think that was a big factor in the enjoyment of it as well. And yeah, I add it to the 6 other League Cups I've seen us win, and 4 Scottish Cups in my lifetime, which isn't, people say, oh, we're spoiled, or it was just another trophy to Celtic. All of those are hugely important to me and special to me, and have memories. And the defeats have been, brutal. There was the Lovencrans, the Lovencrans Scottish Cup final was horrendous. It took me a long time to get over that one. And the Rod Wallace one, when in '99, I think it was. That was a tough one as well. I went home that day and didn't speak to my family. Like, I had relatives up from England, and just walked into my house, and they were like, "Hey, John Paul," and I just went straight up to my
bedroom, slam the door.
I just dark room, and weeping into my pillow. So yeah, you experience the lows, makes the highs so much better. So yeah, it was a great day to be a Celtic fan on Sunday.
Yeah, it was. Hence the title of today's show. One of the other ones that I felt was tough to take was Kilmarnock 1-0 League Cup final. Just, you were looking at that, and again, it was one of the ones where we had enough in terms of personnel to win that game comfortably, and we just didn't. We weren't at the races that day. It was very disappointing. But as you say, that often galvanises us. What doesn't galvanise us is a performance like last night. So Richie Rich comes in on YouTube. Welcome to the show. Highs and lows, lol. Well, the highs are things like that cup final. What I'm talking about, the cup final last weekend, and it puts us all there. It really does put us all there, and everybody's sharing the Ange videos and the brilliant images. I mean, you spoke about the Kyogo goals, the iconic images of him with the smoke behind him as he's celebrating the goal. Laura was talking about the vintage kind of Italian football of the 1990s with all the smoke and all that around about the pitches, and it did bring back that kind of memory. So you see that, you see the images of Rogic and Juranovic running up to Ange, and it's 1888, and we're all sharing everything, loving every bit of content we can get. People are digging out old interviews of Ange and overlaying them on different bits of footage. It's brilliant. And then last night happens, and it brings us right back down to earth with a smash. I always feel on Acsom, JP, it's not always easy, of course, to try after the post-match to keep my emotions and kind of like in check. So after the cup final, I'm absolutely delighted. I mean, just watch back the Scottish Cup final from last season, the quadruple treble one anyway, where we done the watch along. So you actually see our reaction from the penalties, and we're going wild, and the emotions are so high. And then you're expected to then analyse the game after that, and it's not always easy. So after the cup final win against Hibs, I was delighted because it was just a sublime performance by Kyogo, our talisman. I know that's becoming a cliche. But then last night, by the same token, after the game, I didn't want it to be completely the other side of the coin. I didn't want it to be, this is a disaster, this is a crisis, broken crests on the back page of the papers and all that kind of stuff. But it is definitely a high and a low, a bit of a crushing low last night when we go out and we see a similar type of performance that we've seen before under Ange Postecoglou. So the big questions are being asked again around what do we do at 60, 70 minutes when a team as well organised, as well drilled as Livy or St Mirren basically put two big walls in front of us and we can't get through them. And we don't have that creativity, that guile to get through them. Now, last night, there were circumstances such that our front three, JP, Mikey Johnson, Abada and Muffet, our first choice, if everybody's fit, 100% fit, I would argue, is Jota, Kyogo and Forrest, perhaps, on the right.
Oh, yeah.
So, and I'm not ripping any of them individually, but they're dropping standard from what I would consider the first choice to the backup players who were playing last night. That's a stark difference. And it's the same all across the park. Is that the biggest issue once a few players are out through injury or suspension?
I think I don't think anybody was in any doubt that there was maybe another one of these games, in the post, because we're so threadbare, and I was up at Ross County last Wednesday, and we took it to the the very the wire before we what's that, siren pass
again. It's always at this time of the day on a Thursday.
It's yeah.
It's a donut run. It's a donut run.
Yeah, I was just saying about last Wednesday. We obviously went to the last minute and we got that winner. And there's things about that win last Wednesday that worry me going forward if we're not to have fans in the stadium, because so many of the players spoke after that game last Wednesday and said we had to get a win here. We had to do everything we could to get a win here, because we were seeing a full stand behind the goals and another half stand to the side, full of fans who've travelled all the way up. They're giving us their backing, and Joe Hart, I think, said it. Ralston probably said it. Even the manager probably said it. And you do ask yourself, and I know I've said this before, but you do ask yourself, if there was an empty stadium last Wednesday, do we get that last minute winner? Does Anthony Ralston have that extra few inches in his leap to get on the end of it? Because he knows what's coming if he gets that. He's running into the fans. It's bedlam. It obviously was. Right now, you could also say last night there was a lot of the fans there last night, but I went down to try and get a ticket last night. I just was sitting in the house and I thought, we're not going to be at a game for a while. I live in the west of Glasgow. Getting to Paisley is not a hardship. It's not as if I was travelling to Aberdeen or Dingwall or anything like that. I just thought, I'll get the train to Paisley. I'll chance my arm and see what happens. So I went down, and as soon as I arrived at the ground, I saw many, many fans with money in the air, which is obviously never a good sign if you're looking for a ticket. And the weather was horrible. It was cold. There was just this sort of foreboding in the atmosphere about what was coming. And then I saw the lineup, and I was like, oh. And I saw a few people saying, "Are we going easy on St Mirren here because of the fact that they've got players missing or whatever?" And I just had a bad feeling that maybe last night was going to be that sort of banana skin. And I know we hit them with so much shots and the possession we had, and everything else, but like you said, we didn't have anything to change it at 60, 70 minutes. There was nothing there on the bench. There was it showed the sort of the nature of the squad and how short we are. I mean, like you said, Moffat, Johnston, and Abada, who has not been convincing anybody for quite some time now in his normal position. So he's in an unnatural position in the middle, but with a guy who's been playing in the Colts, and Mikey Johnston again, who is fast becoming persona non grata almost. I mean, some of the things I was reading on Twitter, I mean, I don't get why people feel the need to broadcast such negativity on Twitter about a specific individual. It's borderline kind of shady behaviour for me. I don't know if Mikey Johnston's on Twitter for his good, for his sake. I would hope he's not, because he's been getting it since last night. It's just been all on him, and I think it's really unfair. He didn't have the greatest of games, but I don't think you could label the whole team as having had a good game. And I know he's been about for ages, and everyone's expecting him, like, oh well, you've been about for a while, you should be able to come in and produce the goods. But produce the goods when you've not got a striker, a recognised striker next to you to set up, and the Callum McGregor chance, the Abada, there's somebody else getting the end of that, somebody that's a bit more wily, and a bit more used to playing in that position, possibly. But I'm not. I went down to St Mirren before to try and get a ticket, and came away watching the start of the first half on my phone, which I hate, and it ended up 0-0 that day as well. Like the last time I tried to go down there. So St Mirren has always been an awkward place to go. And these guys that we were playing, yes, there was, you know, a mixed bag of youth and guys that have been brought back from loan and everything else, but that surely galvanised them, you know, to go, for, you know, to really put in the shift that they did. I mean, they were all playing out of their skin, clearly playing for the manager. He'd used that as a kind of, right, you know, we're up against it here. We wanted to get a game called off, we couldn't get it. And in much the same way as I didn't see the Dundee United Rangers game at the weekend, but I mean, it took them to the 71st minute against a fragmented Dundee United side and a penalty, and obviously, by all accounts, it was a penalty, and there's no. I know it's a joke, you know, the whole Rangers penalty thing, but you know, they were 19 minutes away from having the exact same result as we did last night at home, with a fairly strong side, you know, like with most of their players available. So I'm sure someone will probably say that they didn't have their players available, but I mean, from what I could see, it was a reasonably strong side against what was a weakened Dundee United side. So a Dundee United side that we took apart at Tannadice a week before or 2 weeks before, and there was a stronger Dundee United side as well. So these things are all up and down. I was obviously disappointed last night, but I wasn't. There was no towel in my hand ready to throw into the ring. So
no, I'm exactly the same, JP. And you know, I'm going to get as many of the viewers involved in this discussion as possible. Graham Webster reckons it's been coming. I think there's certainly been games like the Ross County one where, you know, we definitely scraped through. We scraped a 2-1. You know, St Johnstone in the semi-final 1-0. We come back against Hibs to win 2-1. So the games have been tight, absolutely. But in amongst that, you've had like the Dundee United performance, which was tremendous. It was sublime. And, you know, the creative players were able to be creative. Last night, it was very difficult. I want to start off with a discussion around Mikey Johnson. So anybody who is commenting on the video, wherever you're watching it, tell me your thoughts on Mikey, because as JP says, last night, he became the kind of subject or the focus of a lot of fans' ire, right? I don't like seeing it. I'm like yourself, JP. You've got to call it as you see it. I thought last night, Mikey Johnson looked good in the first half. I mean, I don't think anyone can take that away. He looked as though there was an immediacy to his game. He wanted to take on the right back. He was taking players on at will. He got a couple of shots in. What I would say, though, is when you've got a player of the quality of Jota, who's crossing in something like a dozen balls a half, and very rarely is anybody getting on the end of them, it would be a little bit unfair to criticise Johnson for that, because I just don't think we have anybody in the middle to get on the end of balls. Otherwise, you know, the 2 games against Livingston, 80 crosses over the 2 games, 0 goals. That proves the point. Last night, again, you could have been crossing that ball into the box all night long, JP. No one's going to get on the end of the ball. And this was my frustration. So then you look at Mikey and you say, well, he's played 75 games for Celtic. He's 22. He should be able to work out what's his contingency here. That's not working. What's plan B? Because it doesn't always fall down to the manager. You've got to work it out as a player. He's not a kid anymore. You know, he's the same age as Tony Ralston. He's no longer a kid. He's the same age as Jota. So you've got to look at the fact that he's got plenty of experience now. And I would expect more from him over the 90. Robert reckons he was good for 10 minutes only. I watch the game and I take notes and I try as best as I can to give a balanced view on it. I felt he played okay in the first half. I certainly didn't have many concerns. I had a wee bit more concern about Moffat on right.
Exactly.
I thought, and I wasn't going to criticise him, he's making his first start. He's a teenager, but he was struggling to get by his man. At least Johnston was creating an opening by getting by his man.
Which is why all the guns were trained, or the guns have been trained on Johnston, because nobody really would be as harsh as to start putting out tweets going, Moffat's not good enough, get him out, you know, don't want to ever see him in a Celtic shirt again. Well, after his first start, that would be the most harsh thing ever, I think. So because he gets a free pass, Abada, I mean, I don't think Abada was to be free of criticism last night, you know. But again, maybe he is because he's getting played out of position, and so Johnston's the only one that's played in his position in the front three. So therefore, everybody's like, well, you were in your right position. You've been here for X amount of time. You know the city, so why didn't you produce the goods against St Mirren? You know, a depleted St Mirren team. It's just when you look at it through that optic, it's just that's the people's decisions, and I just find it I find it unhelpful to see tweets that are gaining traction online, which are getting sort of 1,000 to 2,000 likes, and it's all about Mikey Johnson being get him out and all this sort of stuff, because I just find it hard. Of course, he didn't play that well last night, but I don't think the majority of the team played well last night. There was decision making was poor at times. Callum McGregor didn't play great, and he's been unbelievable of late. I thought he was great last week at Ross County, and but I didn't think it was the same Callum McGregor last night. One other thing that went through my head as I didn't sleep last night with this booster thing that I got, but it was the fact that a question was posed to Stephen Glass in the post-match from Easter Road, and he was asked by the reporter if he thought that the uncertainty over the game going ahead, the fans maybe not being there or being there, and just the whole environment that we're currently playing in, if that had affected the players. And Stephen Glass said, "Well, I'm not a player anymore, so I can't comment." But it did make me think, did the players all want to play last night? In this environment, 2 days before Christmas. I'm not suggesting that would mean that's why we didn't win. I'm not for 1 second, but I'm just saying that maybe some of their heads were not right, for that game, because it's a strong possibility that some of them might not wanted to have played in that game, like going to a club that's been riddled with a COVID outbreak, and they're putting themselves on the line. They might have been like, well, wait a minute, I don't want to play football right now when there's this thing's flying around everywhere and infecting everybody left, right, and centre. So I just that was the first time that I'd actually thought about that when I heard that post match last night.
Yeah, I think Laura touched on it as well. You're playing 90 minutes of a physical contact sport, and there's coughing and spluttering, and you're very tight with your markers, etc. It is ravaged. The team, St Mirren, had been ravaged, so much so that they're playing a 16, a 17 and a 19-year-old. And I said last night, Jay Henderson, the 19-year-old, probably was their best player. Dylan Reid had a bit of experience. Kieran Afford was making his debut, and that's all fair and well. But my biggest point when it comes to that stage of the game, JP, and we've seen it against Livy, we've seen it against Dundee United, where we're coming up against banks of defences and we can't figure out how to break them down. We're getting told, stick to your principles, it will happen. And it did against Ross County, so you trust the process on that occasion. But when it doesn't happen, it almost did against Livy because we got the penalty, which was missed. But when it doesn't happen, that's where you start to strip away at that process and say, well, why is it not working? And I think this might just be simple, right? But you look at the game last night in isolation and you say, well, we completely dominated possession. Before anyone else says it, I'll say it. Yes, it doesn't guarantee you goals. I know that. We managed to craft out 30 shots at goal, 80 which were on target, which isn't good enough, really, if you look at that as a ratio. And we had 16 corners. Now, it would be, if you were sitting here and saying to Ange Postecoglou, in terms of the game plan, before you look at the score and you look at the possession and the corners and the shots, you definitely have done enough based on those base stats to win the game. People might say, but we didn't have a clear-cut chance. But I think that, and I listed 5 chances in the last 25 minutes of the game, JP, that had we been a wee bit more clinical, had there been a wee bit more quality, particularly in the attacking third, then you're going to score at least one of them. And I think this is my biggest issue at the moment. I'm going to bring in a few more Mikey Johnson comments. But I just think that the drop-off in quality from your first pick to the next in line is vast. And when you look right through the team, last night, Joe Hart, who wasn't being rested, by the way, according to Ange, because he doesn't rest players, because if you want a rest, you can get it when you're 45, right? That was what he said last night, and I like that. But anybody who was missing last night was through suspension or injury, and he clarified that last night. So Joe Hart's injured, and who's your deputy? Scott Bain. Now, that's a big drop down in quality. Cameron Carter-Vickers is a must start every single week, and I'd like to talk about him at some point during the show. But if a centre-half gets injured, you're going from, let's say, Starfelt, and there's question marks around him in any case, to Welsh, a player that I like. But in terms of the quality of Welsh, Is it a drop down from your first pick, which is Carter Vickers? I would say it is.
Mm-hmm.
Left back, I think, is a problematic area. I don't think we have a stand out left back as a first choice. Right back, let's say Ralston at the moment's got the jersey and your backup's a Croatian international. No concerns there. But everywhere else in the park, I do have concerns. So David Turnbull's out, you bring in Beaton. Yes, he's played well this season, JP, but I don't think he can command a game or orchestrate a game or craft out a chance like Turnbull can. And he's shown that he can with his goals and his assists, as much as I like Beaton. Beyond that, who are you calling upon? Because on the bench, your next option is Scales. And Scales indeed came on for him. That's a big drop down in quality. Left wing, Jota. Your next in line is Mikey Johnston. Huge drop down in quality. And I think that's the issue. So when we look at January, and again, we will be looking at the January transfer window, we cannot look at a situation where 3 players leave the club and 3 players come in, JP, because I don't think we're any further forward there. We need more depth. Now, Colin Watt a few months ago on the show said we need 6 players. It sounds completely off the scale, crazy to even suggest that, because we're not going to buy 6 players. But I bet, if you look at the squad, we probably need 6 players.
I don't think it's too outlandish to say that we need that. I mean, look at Liam Shaw. His name is Liam Shaw, right? I've not just made that up. It was Liam Scales, Liam Shaw. Yeah, he comes into the reckoning last night. He's been nowhere near the first team for months, but it's got to the point where Ange Postecoglou's hand's been forced to play Liam Shaw, and Moffat coming in to start a game as big as that. Again, that's highlighting how thin we are up top, and it's no disrespect to Moffat, because I mean, obviously you're going to want to play in a game for Celtic, but that was a lot of pressure on his shoulders last night to come up with something. It's just like, here's your shirt, go and do something, go and make something happen. And everybody, I think, has seen little snapshots of Moffat being impressed, but that level was like way down to what he was up against last night, and the pressure as well. There was so much pressure involved in the game last night. I think, again, people probably took it a bit lightly in the fact that St Mirren were so ravaged with injury and whatnot, that I think maybe people kind of thought, oh well, this is a shooty in, which is never a good kind of attitude to have going into a game like that. We've seen it far too many times with these away games that just that was their cup final last night. Probably more like a European Cup final for them, because you saw the reaction at the end. It was taking it was a 0-0, but it was probably felt like a victory to them, given what they'd gone through. So our squad needs reinforcements. That's been every single time he gets interviewed, he's asked about January, and it has been in the last month or two. He's been asked, and he just keeps sort of batting it back and saying, "Yeah, we're working behind the scenes." But the reason he's been asked that question is because everybody's seen the first 11 that's been getting put out, and they've seen the bench. We're not watching this with our eyes shut. We can see how thin we are. So 6 players coming in January is not beyond the realms of possibility, I don't think. And I just hope that we have been doing the work behind the scenes, and I hope to God, as Ange Postecoglou has said also several times, that we live in a strange world at the moment where things can happen that affect things like transfers or getting people here from Japan or wherever in the world. So I just hope that nothing on that front affects us, and then obviously that brings us on to the internationals at the end of the start of February, and how that might affect us. I mean, that's just the luck of the draw, isn't it? It's with the Japan Australia game.
I know.
Of course, Japan are playing Australia. Why wouldn't they be? But yeah,
it seems to always be, JP, this season. It's a one step forward, 2 back sometimes, and Ange must feel very frustrated. I was reading this morning, we've got about 11 players injured at the moment, and some might say that you bring those players back, and then we're a different beast, and I get that. But at this moment in time, I don't see a situation this season where we don't have a treatment table as large as that, because it's an ongoing issue at the moment at Celtic. And yeah, if we do have the full complement of staff, we go out there last night and we beat St Mirren comfortably. I have absolutely no doubts whatsoever about that. But we're not, and we're having to deal with what we've got. And the standard of the player that's the backup or sometimes the third choice is simply not good enough. You look at the bench last night, we had 3 fullbacks on the bench. Now, I'm not saying they can't affect a game. They can. Ralston showed that the other night against Ross County. But you want to have some kind of attacking option on that bench, and we simply did not have it. Thanks, everybody, for coming in with your comments on the Mikey Johnston, and it shows you the wide-ranging comments that we're going to get. Frosty, we need to move Mikey on, simple as that. Robert Wallace reckons that he's not up to the task. And Brown Warrior comes in to say, and I agree with this, he was the only player causing them problems in attack. I reckon in the first half, especially, he was causing them some problems. He had the beating of his man, JP. They were doubling up on him, which should then create a pocket of space. We weren't actually utilising that space because I just didn't think Abada looked like an actual centre forward last night. He's out of position. And the DJ of choice, I don't hate Mikey Johnston. I just think it's time for him to move on. There's another suggestion, and this was made last night as well. Mikey Maher. Mikey needs to be loaned out. He's not good enough for us at present. He needs a Christie loan. Now, the at present part of that summation is quite interesting, JP, because I'm going to say I agree with that. And folk might say he's 22, he needs to be the finished article. Ralston didn't show what he had until he was 22. McGregor didn't show what he had until he was 21. He's 22, yet he's had 2 lengthy injuries in his short career so far. And I think I've said this season is make or break for him. I think it definitely is. What I would take on point of the loan, I don't think he's going to get a loan because I don't think we've got the squad for that. You put Mikey Johnston out on loan, we've got even less options, JP. But what I think he needs to do, that Christie done, is he needs to build himself up physically. I think that's a massive part that's missing in Mikey Johnston's game.
I mean, if he went away and played, and got like a run at 20, 30 games, playing week in, week out, somewhere at a decent level, then yeah, I mean, it definitely worked for Christie. I mean, I remember when Christie was at Aberdeen, my friend James is a massive Aberdeen fan and would say every week, he'd be like, that's Christie, man of the match again. Like, he's outstanding. Like, I don't want him to go back. I know he's going to go back to you guys, but I don't want him to because he's playing so well for us. And that was something, when I heard that, I was just like, really? Like, Ryan Christie, seriously, he's actually that good. And I thought he'd maybe just found his level. And then he came back and he did play well for us. He obviously takes a lot of pelters for this wayward shooting pattern, but I don't think he's he's definitely not a terrible player. He's a good player. Potentially a better player than Bournemouth. And time will tell whether or not he can get a move from there. But I certainly with Mikey Johnston, there's no way he's going out on loan in January. I think that's wishful thinking on people's parts if they think we're going to let a player who's started the game last night in late December go out on loan in January. Unless a miracle happens and we do get reinforcements in all areas of the park that we want, but life doesn't necessarily work like that. So maybe at the end of the season, I don't know what his contract situation is, like whether or not he's close to the edge of his contract right now. I don't know. Somebody can maybe enlighten me on that, but I'd say it's far more likely to happen at the end of the season. And whether he wants to do that or not, it's there's got to be a bit of the player decision in that as well.
Oh, that does. I mean, I'm just going to check his contract while I'm having a look through some of these comments. Now, I'd agree that injuries are a major issue at the moment. The main reason for our recent struggles, it's a massive reason for them, Kookaburra, and it's something that Ange Postecoglou has touched upon as well, JP. He's talking about the fatigue. I would go back to the Betis game. He definitely rested a few players against Betis, there's no doubt about it. Unfortunately, he didn't rest Kyogo. And I think that, when we get the highs, often it's, all hail Ange. And that's fair enough. I mean, he's obviously walked into a scenario here. And we've spoken about this at length, JP, a very difficult one. He's come in on his own, no fuss, no 17-seater bus with staff on it, none of that kind of stuff. He's worked with what he's got. He's lost 3 major assets. And, he's probably not had as many players coming in as he would have liked. He's inherited a couple of legacy signings where the deals were already done. And Sean Urhoghide, would Ange have liked them at the club? I don't know. It was too late to change the deals. So he's walked into a scenario like that where, we've gone into the second leg against Midtjylland, and a must-win Champions League qualifier with Dane Murray making his debut at centre-half. It's been difficulty after difficulty. He's been enticed to Celtic by Peter Lawwell. He's been unveiled at Celtic by Don Mackay, and now he's working under his third CEO. And he's only been here for 6 months. I mean, it's been a bit of a rough ride for Ange. And I take all of that into consideration. Then you start looking at the amount of injuries that have been racking up. And I would agree it's a major issue. He's spoken about a fatigue. That goes again back to the size of the squad, JP. So he's played players far more than he would have liked. That's not on Ange. That's on the board. So the squad, for me, is depleted. We've touched on Ryan Christie. Ange has spoken about Christie. Christie's spoken about Ange. He played him. When he came in, he played him as much as he possibly could. He's gone away down to Bournemouth, and we wish him well in his career. But I tell you what, a player like Ryan Christie last night, when you're struggling down the left and the right, the adaptability on both wings, he would have been key in this team at the moment. So why have the board not made sure he stays? Now, people say, but he wanted to leave. Anything's possible in football, JP. And we've actually lost him and El Yunusi down the left. Yes, we brought in Jota, and he's been a revelation so far. But we're weaker down the left over the piece than we were last season, because El Yunusi and Christie being your two options over the piece, over the two players, are stronger than Jota and Johnson, I would suggest.
Yeah, they definitely are. But you mentioned Peter Lawwell there. I actually saw him last night walking into...
Was he standing with tickets? No.
No. Somebody asked him. Somebody did actually say, "Any spares, Peter?" And he smiled and walked in the main entrance of the stadium. So,
did they have the club suit and tie and all that on?
Yeah. Did I? So he's not gone away.
What do you think his role is at the moment? His real influence at Celtic.
I mean,
I'm just throwing this out there, JP. We don't have inside information.
He's obviously a fan. You know what I mean? There's no denying that he's a fan. What he contributes to the club at this moment in time, many people have speculated that he's never really gone away. And obviously seeing him at an away game on a Wednesday night could mean one of two things: that he just fancied going to the game, like me, knowing that we were not going to be potentially at a game for a while, or he's sort of more involved in things than we care to believe or know. But yeah, I mean, just talking about the players that left. I was comfortable with everybody that left, because ultimately we'd heard so much about these guys that wanted to leave for a number of months, maybe over a year. So anybody that left the building, I was okay with. Although it was obviously frustrating, because, like you say, Christie under. Well, I think I saw highlights of that no look pass that Christie put in for Kyogo Furuhashi.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, things like that.
Tremendous.
Christie was doing really well under Postecoglou in that short space of time, and it kind of harks back to the whole Dembele and Edouard up front together. That we got that brief glimpse at what that might have been like, and then he was away, and Dembele was away, so we never got to see it over the course. But yeah, I mean, I'm optimistic about who we can bring in. It was all rushed in the summer. The board, I think, as much as everybody's been critical of them, and rightly so for other things, they did provide these guys that we are all hailing as heroes, like Jota and Kyogo and Carter Vickers, Joe Hart. All these guys came in, so they have to be commended for that. And it was in a very, very short space of time that they got these guys in. So we've had a decent amount of time, 4 or 5 months now, to explore. Excuse me, what Ange Postecoglou wants, and the more fool them if they're not playing ball with him. And I know he made mention of people not dragging their heels, but maybe I have to sort of say to them, by the way, this is taking too long. I need these guys in quicker than this. So hopefully they've learned the lessons on that as well, and we do get them in and they integrate into the squad. Early in January. I believe we're not going on any trip now, which is a mighty relief after last year. I mean,
I thought you were going to call it a jolly there.
No. I mean, I do genuinely believe that it was supposed to be a training trip, and I'll never not believe that. I know many people disagree with that, and the pictures of Neil Lennon and Scott Brown with the pints and the sun loungers obviously fly in the face of that a little bit. But I can't believe that a club like Celtic would be as reckless as to just go on like a lads holiday, at that time, unless it was also predominantly a training trip that they felt was going to benefit the team going into that second half of the season. What happened after that was obviously a disaster. So I think going to Portugal or wherever it was they had planned, again, would the players want to go to Portugal at this particular point in time? With the restrictions and everything else, it's again something that they have to be mindful of. And I'm glad that hopefully they just go to St Mirren Hydro or something like that. Like,
imagine that, yeah, play on the Bowling Green, absolutely. Talking of old school, this is the last bulletin before Christmas. So tomorrow, when you tune in at 12:30, it won't be the typical bulletin with two of the team chatting about the world in Celtic. But at 12:30, there will be content. So get on the channel, and it's going to be more nostalgic. JP, we've been working on some pre-recorded content that we can put out on Christmas Eve and Christmas Day. So if you want nostalgia and you want to see things like Seymour Hydro and Strathclyde Park for pre-season training, tune in at 12:30 on Christmas Eve and Christmas Day, because we've got it all to show you. And by the way, it's been pretty good digging out the archives to put this together. So I hope you enjoy it. Brown Warrior, a very regular contributor to the channel. So thanks for your support. Christie wanted away last summer, as did Iron and Edward. I have no doubt they were three of the players who wanted away, the want-away stars. The big thing about last summer and the season that then ensued, I guess, is that Ayer basically got down to business last season, and I don't think his performances were affected by the fact that he wanted away. Edward, I know he scored quite a few goals, but I think his performances were affected. Christie, I think his performances were affected as well. But what I would say, and this is coming on to the follow-up comment that Brown Warriors has made, once a player wants away, you need to get rid ASAP. Generally speaking, I agree with that. However, I think there are occasions where a player has just about been out the door and a new manager's come in and revitalised them and turned them around. And I think Ange has done that with a couple of players himself. The obvious ones being Ralston, Beaton and Tommy Rogic. But I think in the past, Jamesy Forrest was almost on his way out, revitalised under a new manager. Scott Brown's been in that boat as well. So in general, I get what you're saying there, but I think there are players. I think Christie might have been that player. Or am I just pining for him because he's a guy that we could really utilise right now? You spoke about some of the excellent signings, and when you script them like that, Carter Vickers, Hart, Jota, Kyogo, they're four brilliant signings, JP. Now, if we can do that kind of business again in January, then we'll be buzzing. I think the next tier of signing is probably Abada and Juranovic, maybe Starfelt. Would you put them maybe into a category just below the four? And then everybody else below that, your James McCarthy's, etc., etc. But if we can go out and get the kind of quality in the top four that you've mentioned there, then I think you're going to see a completely different beast. It sounds as though the business is getting done early. You're confident that we can get the bodies in, JP?
Yeah, I'm confident that, providing that we don't hit any bumps in the road with regards to COVID and all the rest of it, like that. That's obviously, it's a changing day by day, so what might be set in stone right now might not be set in stone. Families are involved and things like that. It's not everybody that can just drop things and fly to the other side of the world, to go and play football. I know Celtic's one of the most important things to us in our lives, but right now, for any potential new signing, it's not probably the most important thing in their life. And I respect that and understand that, because there's lots going on at the moment. But yeah, I'd like to think, like I said, that we've had this time to identify and court and sweet talk, if you want to call it that, players into coming to to Scotland in January, which is. And a friend messaged me yesterday and say, "Oh, I'm thinking about coming up to do some hill walking at the start of January," and I was just like, "Really? You're going to come up to Scotland?" Like, he's from way down south of England, and I just think, if you're going to do some hill walking, the visibility is not going to be that great, so might want to consider that. And he was like, "Oh yeah, that's a good point. Never thought of that." So yeah, I mean, coming to Scotland in January, it'll certainly be a shock to the system for anybody coming from more sunnier or tropical climes. Because at least Kyogo and Joe Hart and Cameron Carter-Vickers, I'm sure, are well aware of UK weather. But Jota and Kyogo, coming from Portugal and Japan in the summer, at least arrived here when things looked okay. There was sun in the sky. Definitely not sun in the sky today, and probably won't be for a while yet. So I hope that we've got people identified and they come in on the same level, and push the people that are here, and are potentially guys that just pick up a jersey straight away. I mean, that doesn't always happen like that, but we'll see what happens.
Yeah, I think we're counting on that. We're counting on these players coming in and being able to adapt to the climate, to the game, the pace of the game, a brand new environment, the culture of the country, and also give us a performance straight away. We do expect that. We're very demanding as football fans, JP, but Mikey Johnson, going back, final point on Mikey is that I didn't realise this, but he's actually under contract at Celtic until May the 31st, 2025. So
wow.
He will be here for a while. There's no way that we're going to let him leave, especially when you look at the lack of options that we have on the left-hand side. Now, we've spoken through some of the performances last night, the good, the bad and ugly, but one player I want to point out, again, solid at the back, is Cameron Carter-Vickers. My biggest concern, though, JP, is we don't have someone of a similar kind of level as him playing alongside him. If we did, then it would be a daunting prospect for any forward line in Scottish football.
Yeah.
And I think that, when you're looking at the amount of centre-halves we have, the board might look at the situation and say, we're well enough covered. I don't believe we are.
No, definitely not. I mean, I would say, I don't know, I don't maybe expect us to go out and splash, millions of pounds on somebody, a centre-half. I don't really know if there's a market whereby we have got an identified centre half that is going to cost between 5 and 10 million quid. But I'd like to think that we could identify somebody that's maybe not getting a game somewhere that because look at Carter-Vickers, he wasn't getting a game where he came from. Neither was Joe Hart. So potentially, I know it's a bit sort of loose, but potentially one of the two of them could have identified somebody and said, well, by the way, there's this guy down south that we know of. Obviously, you'd like to think that Celtic's scouting network is covering those bases, but seeing as we don't know really who's doing what at Celtic right now, and it just does seem to be Ange Postecoglou and the coaches that he's inherited. We don't know who's the head of recruitment. We don't know who's doing that job. So maybe we'd have to come to rely on, remember Man United were like that to Alex Ferguson, or we should sign Ronaldo. Nip in his head to sign Ronaldo on the way back from a friendly against Sporting Lisbon, I think it was. So maybe there's somebody that they could identify down south that Carter-Vickers knows, or that Joe Hart knows. But yeah, I think we definitely need to bring in another centre half to see us through to the end of the season. If it's just a loan, fine. If it's a signing, great. But I don't. The drop, like you say, the drop off in quality is too much to bear at times. And Starfelt has. I don't think he's played terribly, but he has these moments in games that just create this huge sort of doubt around him, and like question marks just fly around his head when, you know, he does something like, you know, let the ball bounce or loses a man at a corner or whatever. But I think, I don't know. I don't think he's been as bad as he's made out to be. And I think it's, again, one of those ones where people make a decision about somebody and then they rigidly stick to it, and just, you know, they make their decision about someone and they dig their heels in, and that's it. You know, they don't allow that person to shift their mindset. You know, if they have a good game, it's kind of like they would begrudgingly kind of say, they probably wouldn't even admit it. They just sort of like move on to the player next to them or whatever. But, you know, I think for the way that our squad is right now, you know, we lose Carter Vickers, then, you know, it's one of those moments like when Joe Hart goes down in that home game. I think it was against Aberdeen, right at the start, and the whole stadium, you could just feel everybody in the stadium going, "Oh no, this is not good." Like, we lose Joe Hart, we're not just losing a goalkeeper, we're losing influence and experience and everything else. It's the intangibles that people speak about, you know, when they argue against the stats guys. You know, the things that you can't really, you know, mark up or mark down, you know, as things that Joe Hart brings to the team. And I think Carter Vickers has started to bring a level of calm and steel at the back. You know, I said to the guy next to me on Sunday, he kind of reminds me a bit of Paul McGrath. You know, he's got that kind of, you know, just no messing, you know, looks like a looks like a centre half from the 90s or something like that, you know, just like, you know, a kind of a throwback almost.
Even with the body shape, because
Yeah.
it doesn't look as though he's the most athletic, you know, but with the ball at his feet, he's so comfortable, JP. But he does everything at a pace where it doesn't look as if he's ever rushed. He's always got time on the ball. So I get what you mean with the Paul McGrath comparison. And obviously with the shot outside his shorts as well. So I'm all for any kind of Paul McGrath style player, because, you know, he was one of the players I always wanted to see in the hoops. There has been a statement just released from Celtic, and as always, the commenters are first to release that when we're on the bulletin. Michael Nicholson has been appointed CEO. Statement just released. Thank you, Stephen Cairns. And I'm looking at that statement on the Celtic website as we speak as well. So there we go. He's now working under CEO number 3. It was an appointment from within. My concern isn't around about him per se. There's nothing, there's no reason whatsoever for me to have a concern about that individual. I can't pinpoint any reasons why I don't think that's a good idea on an individual basis, JP. I think my concern comes into play that it's clear that Celtic at boardroom level need to change. They need far more forward-thinking individuals in that boardroom, individuals who can engage with the fan base, who have something in common with the fan base. At the moment, the boardroom doesn't have that. And when someone from within is promoted to that position, it would suggest that they're already living the culture that is already set at the club. That's my concern. So it's nothing individually against Michael Nicholson specifically. It's about the fact that it's same old, same old. There's someone, move them into that position, we continue as normal with the same viewpoint on the fans, the same viewpoint on our European aspirations. You know, I just don't think that kind of appointment is what we need to move forward as a club.
Nah, I mean, I think his silence and the club's sort of silence really, and then when they have spoken, like at the AGM, I wasn't really bowled over by some of the things that were said. You know, that's what we like to hear about the season ticket holders and renewing regardless and all that. And the way that they dealt with the Bernard Higgins chat, where they didn't sort of really commit either way. They just sort of gave like a vague response that continued the question marks over that appointment. And just, I don't want to sort of go on about Dominic Mackay or anything like that. I mean, certainly they don't go on about Dominic Mackay. It's like he never existed. But he seemed to be somebody that really wanted to engage with the support and the media and had ideas. And, you know, I heard ideas that he had for things within the club that, you know, sounded quite progressive as well. And suddenly we had this guy, albeit, from a rugby background, but, by all means a Celtic fan. And, you just had a sort of level of engagement that had been missing. And then they appoint a guy temporarily who has been more or less silent, other than that really awkward staged sort of interview where there was the three of them. Was it the video that was released before the AGM? Is that right? Am I getting that wrong? There was a video that was released of three guys speaking, and Michael Nicholson was there, and he was referred to as, "Oh, we brought Michael in," and Dominic Mackay was ignored. And
yeah, as if he's been airbrushed out the history books.
Yeah, but even then, when I saw Michael Nicholson there, maybe that will change now that he's been made permanent. Maybe we'll get a sort of state of the nation address from him. I'm not holding my breath, because I would have thought that would have come before now. I just think that there's been such a lack of engagement from the club. We've spoken about it before. They've allowed Ange Postecoglou to really be the face of the club, and they've been quite happy for that to happen, because they can see how much the fan base identifies with him and appreciates him, and they've been happy for that to happen, and it's kept the heat off them. But if they don't get their work done in January, then there'll definitely be heat on them. Whether we love Ange Postecoglou or not, there'll be heat on the board.
See, the thing, there's two trains of thought here. One of them, which Kev Graham says from time to time, he would rather not hear that much from the CEO, because if you don't hear from your CEO, it means that there's a lot of things going well on the football park and you're not too concerned with the boardroom issues. But I think as Celtic fans, we have a history of people at the forefront of the boardroom, like Fergus McCann, like Peter Lovell, love or loathe either of them. I don't know if anybody still has an issue with Fergus. I don't know how they could possibly have an issue with Fergus, but I know that the way that Peter Lovell left, a lot of people criticised them. But we've always had that focal point, that figurehead. JP, we don't have it anymore. I mean, I look at that boardroom, and again, I'm going to reiterate this. This is not an attack on Michael Nicholson. I just feel that it's very much continue to fade with the Celtic boardroom. It's like there's somebody else who lives and breathes our culture. They're not going to cause us too much problems. They're not going to go out and sign Juranovic when we don't want him to on those terms, and he's not going to cause us any problems. You know what I mean? So in many ways, I just feel it's like the nod and dog scenario. Everybody's just agreeing with everybody else, patting everybody on the back, where what we need in there is somebody to say, well, actually, maybe we're not doing things that well. And I think that, and again, I'm not revising this, but, we know that Don Mackay wanted a fresh approach on a number of things. Perhaps behind the scenes, he was doing a lot of things that weren't so great. We don't know. We're not party to that kind of information, JP, but we've heard quite a lot in terms of what he wanted to do at, on, and with the stadium, that you look at and think, well, that would have been great to create that kind of revenue, additional revenue that we've never created, or we've never created it for a long time at the club. So you think, well, was he too radical in many ways for the current incumbents of the Celtic board? Potentially. This will go, I think, without too much drama. The fact that Michael Nicholson's been made permanent, I think it's what we all expected anyway. We've gone through that issue with Bernard Higgins. And I suggested a couple of weeks back that there's probably some contractual situation where, really, would Celtic come out and name somebody? I think they would be on shaky ground to do that and say, we're not going to appoint him, particularly if there was an agreement that he would be coming in. So obviously the onus is then on the other party to make that clear, which he has done through the press. But again, no engagement whatsoever from the club. So nothing has changed in that regard with regards to the engagement. And I think that is something that's going to rear its ugly head again. Ange Postecoglou is the Celtic board winning the proverbial watch, if you ask me. Like you say, he's taking all the bullets for them. He's standing out there in all the press conferences, taking on every question that's thrown his way, batting loads of them right back at the person asking him the questions. And he's no one's mug, but that only works if you're getting results, JP, because there's no real... You've seen it last week, the furore over us winning the cup, followed by the disappointment of last night. So if indeed we continue as we are with a threadbare squad and we don't reinforce in January, then it's going to be very interesting, because I think that fans and fan groups will ramp up the pressure on the current board, Nicholson or not. Because they're seen as a whole. I don't see a focal point or a figurehead in that boardroom. I don't think there's anybody in that boardroom that you wouldn't have any kind of confidence of standing up against and debating with in terms of Celtic and the future of the club. I think you'd have a task to do that with Peter Lawwell. I think you'd have a task to do it with Fergus McCann. But there's nobody in that boardroom that you would be fearful of in any way, shape or form if discussing the future of this club, JP, is there?
No, I don't think so. I think there's always been like a kind of intimidating presence about the people in charge. As much as we can criticise Peter Lawwell, you do feel like he was the type of guy that threw his weight around and got to a level within European football as well, where he took up a position there, and I don't know, you just always felt that he would fly the flag, whether he got too involved in everything to with regards to Celtic in the latter couple of years he was there. That's probably something we might not ever find out. I mean, we can speculate, but power and responsibility can become quite insatiable to have, and maybe that was what happened there. But like you say, nobody would muck about Fergus McCann. And he wouldn't suffer fools. We've heard that from Jim, or when Jim speaks about Fergus, it blows my mind to think that he was involved with that. And I met a guy in the street actually, and we were talking about Jim Orr and just saying he was right in the eye of that storm at that time, and played a huge part of everything that went on back then. So it's quite mad to think that he knew this, heroic figure in our history, Fergus McCann. I've said it before, but I'll never ever get over the fact that he was booed when we raised the league flag in '98. That was one of the most baffling moments of my first season as a season ticket holder, and so it would be my first league game, and there's people around about booing, like quite a number of people as well, and you're just like, wow, this guy has done really well by us, and history will show that. I didn't know that at that point. I didn't know it was coming. I didn't know John Barnes was coming, or Martin O'Neill was coming, or Gordon Strachan, or I didn't know what success was laying ahead of us. But without Fergus McCann, we don't have that infrastructure to be able to entice a manager like Martin O'Neill, or entice players of the level that we did. So,
listen, the domination is for me, it's still could be considered Fergus's legacy. The domination for 9 years, JP, the four trebles, and I'm not taking away from the people who were at the club doing the work, but this is a legacy, because without that man, we wouldn't have a club. It's that simple. We're 8 minutes away from going out of circulation. So I think that there was an issue with Peter Lawwell, because I think that the profile can get to such a level that it intoxicates the ego, and often that can be very dangerous, particularly when it should be the club constantly benefiting, rather than the CEO being a larger figure than many of the players that are at the club. That should never happen. He's more well known than many of the figures at the club. That should never be the case. So I think there's a balance in that. From what Kevin Graham says, you want it to be behind the scenes, absolutely, but they still need to be a very strong figurehead who is able to stand up for the club first and foremost, but have the forward-thinking vision to take the club forward. Have we got that? I don't think so. Are we more concerned with the team at this moment in time and what we do in January? 100%. So we will continue to speak about it. JP, I'm going to have to thank you. I thank you every week for joining us on the show. You're an important part of the team, but you've done it when you're not 100% match fit. You've came in here like James McCarthy, probably 69%. And you've done it, and you've done an hour, and you've done so well. This is the last bulletin before Christmas, as I said. We've spoken about some faces that you might see tomorrow on the Acsom channel, Terry Cassidy being one of them. So tune in at 12:30 tomorrow if you haven't done so already, because it will only be on YouTube. get onto the YouTube channel and subscribe. It's free and we put out daily content. I'm pretty sure you'll enjoy the nostalgia leading up to the Christmas festive period. I was out and about yesterday, JP, meeting quite a few people who actually watch A Celtic State of Mind, and I was dropping off some frames and auction items, etc. And I came away with gifts. That shows you how good our support is for Acsom. People were giving me gifts as I left their place. So I was all over the high points, Glasgow and the surrounding areas, and I enjoyed every moment of that. Everybody who's tuned in this year, thanks everybody for your support, JP. And I don't just say that. You come through the studio, you know how much it means to us. We have set up a fundraiser for St Mary's. The total raised, I say total, over that piece, the charity weekender and the charity auction was £28,000. But what we've decided to do is to keep it open. So throughout the year, JP, that link will always be there. And if anybody wishes to donate, it's going to be under every single video we put out this year. And the donations are still coming in, by the way. And as soon as they come in, we're transferring them over to St Mary's. If they require very specific funds during the year, there may be certain points during that year, JP, that we say, right, let's do a charity drive for them. They need X, Y, or Z. But at the moment, I can safely say that the Celtic supporters who got behind that fundraiser have made an incredible difference to St Mary's moving forward. So thank you all for that.
Do a football match.
We should actually. Yeah. You can get your old Celtic jersey back on that you wore at Celtic Park. I would need to get back on the treadmill personally, but when you get to the wrong side of 40, these things aren't as simple and natural as they used to be, JP. You think you know what you want to do with the ball, but then executing it is the issue. It looks great in your mind, but then you try and do it. But yeah, why not? Let's get a wee game together. We could do a fundraising game. I think that would be tremendous. Any other suggestions, get involved. It's not just Acsom, by the way. Thanks everybody for congratulating us on that. What we are simply doing is providing a platform for people to donate, and we're pushing that, we're pushing the message, but it's the donations for the Celtic fans, JP. It's the amount of time that's been given by the people who contributed and other podcasts who contributed and people who sent us items for auction. And if you're wondering why these ones are still here, that's because someone within A State of Mind actually won these auctions. So there are no fake prizes or anything like that. The donations were made and they've been paid over. So it's been a great year to, when we're looking at building the channel. JP, it's been fantastic. We had a great wee trip into London. We won some accolades and brought them up for the Acsom team, which is the viewers as well as everybody that contributes. And we're looking forward to 2022. Thanks every single one of you for getting involved. As I say, remember to subscribe on YouTube for more free content. And all that's left for me to say is go away and have a wee hot toddy, JP. Thanks for joining me on A Celtic State of Mind.